Delta 547, wind 19016, runway 22 right, clear for takeoff.
Runway 22 right, clear for takeoff, Delta 547.
Taxi via
Air traffic controllers protect our nation's airways. These are the stories of real air traffic controllers to boldly deliver a safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic from their departure point to their final destination.
Wind 19016, runway 22 right, clear for takeoff.
Runway 22 right, clear for takeoff, Delta 547.
Okay, so what you shouldn't do, this kind of goes back to flying a little bit. Well, I'm old enough to remember a guy named Sky King. You're old enough to remember that, okay? And if you're not old enough to remember that, that was one of my heroes growing up. I mean, oh yeah. And so, man, I mean, the storyline was about as hokey as it gets, and it was very improbable, but that looked really cool to me when I was about 6. I thought, you know, if I ever get old enough to pack that away in the back of my mind, I want to do something like that, you know. And sure enough, you know, later on in 1975, went out and got my pilot's license. I thought, well, anyway, so that did give me a little bit of background, and it did help over there at the center. On my check ride at the for flying, you know, I'd done the flying part. I'd already passed the written, and I remember I had to take this check ride with this guy that was, man, this guy was an old Marine. You know, he was about as a dog-faced Marine as they come. I quickly learned he was more bark than he was bite, but he barked a lot. And so he starts asking me these questions. He says, all right, he'd ask such and such as, all right, well, what's the minimum visibility outside of a control zone, you know, 2,000 feet? Okay, so, okay, well, you have to have 1 mile visibility, free of the clouds, and, you know, going through all that kind of stuff. And I got through all of that. That was the last question. He kind of looked down at his sunglasses at me like this. He says, boy, he says, don't you ever do that. And that was it. That was kind of the same thing. Don't ever use an arc, you know. Don't use an arc, whatever you do. But I remember getting up to the academy. You know, I was in one of the first classes right after the strike. And here we are, man. In like January, it was January 1983. It was snowing, and they put us up in, oh man, these accommodations. I mean, it wasn't the Ritz. I mean, that is for sure. But it was, I quickly learned that, man, you better find some friends that know a little bit about this, and because you're not gonna get through it by yourself. And so I found a study group that, you know, most of us kind of made it through. But yeah, it was definitely stressful. And you knew, man, every like graded problem was like, man, you're doing this problem for your job, sort of. So I think that was sort of the point, man. It was like a 3-month stress test. So anyway.
Yeah, it was stressful. And one of the things they told us that first day in the auditorium was 2 out of 3 of you won't make it. And if you're 30 years old today, you won't make it at all. Well, I was 2 weeks from turning 30. So I kind of fidgeted when he said that. And
I was 30 and a half.
And the guy next to me looked at me like, well, I guess you're one of the ones that won't be here. So it was very stressful. One of the things, two things, military fam trips. We got to go fly military aircraft, and it was part of the ATC training manual. It was so we could get the pilot's perspective, which would help us in our careers as controllers. So we got to go fly all kinds of military aircraft. I remember Kyle, who had the race and won against Bob. He and I used to go to the Chandelier Islands south of New Orleans every year and go fishing. And the F-15s would come over and just come really low and just blow right by, but you wouldn't see them coming. You'd hear them after they've passed you, and then you go run out the big boat and look, and now they're climbing back up again. And we're like, man, that would be so cool. Well, it turns out we got to do that. We got to fly in those F-15s out of New Orleans. It was a great experience. I threw up 3 times in my flight. There are other flights that we flew. You know, you never knew if you were going to get sick or not. We had one controller, Fred Velasquez. He said he had a stomach of a goat, and he never threw up. He never had a problem with it. But that was some of the greatest times. And the FAA not only allowed it, they encouraged it for us to do that.